I'm about to share with you a story that happened to a woman whose Thanksgiving turned into a nightmare she never saw coming. And trust me, you need to hear every word of this, because what happened next will shake you to your core. I stood on my son's doorstep with my suitcase in one hand and 2 homemade pumpkin pies in the other. November 25th, 2 days before Thanksgiving. My heart was so full I could barely breathe. It had been 6 months since I'd seen my grandchildren, 6 months of video calls that never lasted long enough, 6 months of goodnight kisses blown through a screen. The door opened. Vanessa stood there in her designer outfit, her platinum blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. Those cold blue eyes scanned me from head to toe like I was a door-to-door salesman she couldn't wait to dismiss. She didn't smile. She didn't step aside to let me in. "There's been a change of plans," she said, her voice sharp as winter frost. Behind her, I could see Michael frozen in the hallway. My son. My boy. The child I'd raised alone after his father died, the man I'd sacrificed everything for. He wouldn't even look at me. "What do you mean?" My voice came out smaller than I wanted. "We've decided to keep Thanksgiving intimate this year. Just our immediate family. I am immediate family." The words caught in my throat. Then I heard them. Those precious voices I'd been dreaming about for months. "Grandma!" Emma's face appeared around Vanessa's legs, those beautiful brown eyes so much like mine lighting up with pure joy. Little Noah pushed past his mother, his arms reaching for me. Vanessa's hand shot out, grabbing both children by their shoulders, pulling them back with a force that made me flinch. "Say goodbye to your grandmother," she said coldly. She was just leaving. The door closed in my face. I stood there holding those pies, staring at the wreath that spelled family in wooden letters, and something inside me shattered into 1,000 pieces. Before continuing, if this story is touching your heart, subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. Don't forget to ring the notification bell, because every day I'm bringing you stories of women who turn their deepest pain into a new good way of living their lives. I don't know how long I stood there on that porch. Time seemed to stop, the way it does when your world collapses around you. The November wind cut through my floral cardigan, but I barely felt it. All I could feel was the ghost of those little arms that had almost reached me, the echo of Emma's voice calling my name. A hand touched my shoulder gently. "Dear, are you all right?" I turned to see Dorothy, the neighbor from next door. She was looking at me with such concern, her kind eyes magnified behind her wire-rimmed glasses. I must have looked like I was about to crumble right there on the doorstep. I don't understand," I managed to whisper. "Come with me," she said softly, taking the pies from my trembling hands. "Let's get you inside where it's warm." Her kitchen smelled like cinnamon and coffee. She sat me down at her table, wrapped a knitted blanket around my shoulders, and poured me tea without asking if I wanted any. Sometimes kindness from strangers hurts more than cruelty from family, because it reminds you of what love is supposed to look like. "How long has this been going on?" Dorothy asked gently. I stared into my teacup, watching the steam rise and disappear. How do you explain to someone that you've been losing your son for 5 years, so slowly you didn't even realize he was slipping away until he was already gone? "It started small," I heard myself saying. "Little things." Vanessa would forget to tell Michael I'd called. Holiday visits got shorter each year. They moved here to Connecticut 3 years ago, said it was for Michael's job, but I think she wanted distance. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, needing something to hold on to. "I was a nurse for 37 years, I continued, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. "Started when Michael was just 8 years old, right after my husband died. David had a heart attack at work. One moment he was here, the next. Michael needed his father, and all he had was me. The memories flooded back with such force I had to close my eyes. Michael's small face at the funeral, not understanding why Daddy wouldn't wake up. The bills piling up on the kitchen counter. The impossible choice between paying the mortgage and buying new shoes for a growing boy. I worked double shifts at the hospital, I said. Sometimes I'd work 16 hours, come home just to kiss Michael goodnight, then head back for the overnight shift. My supervisor used to tell me I'd burn out, but what choice did I have? I had a son to raise, a future to give him. Dorothy reached across the table and took my hand. She didn't say anything, just listened. Sometimes that's all a person needs. I remember his first day of high school. I'd saved for months to buy him new clothes, nice ones, so the other kids wouldn't know we were struggling. He was so handsome in that blue button-down shirt. He hugged me at the door and said, "Mom, when I grow up, I'm going to take care of you the way you took care of me." My voice cracked. I had to pause, take a breath, push down the sob that wanted to escape. I paid for his college. Every penny. No loans, no debt. I wanted him to start his life free, the way I couldn't. I took extra shifts, picked up holiday work when everyone else wanted time off. Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter, I worked them all so Michael could have his education. He graduated top of his class, I continued, and despite everything, pride crept into my voice. Got a job at a prestigious firm in New York. He was so happy. I was so proud. Then he met Vanessa. Dorothy's expression shifted slightly. She knew what was coming. At first, I thought she was wonderful. Beautiful, confident, successful. Michael was so in love, and I wanted him to be happy. I wanted him to have what his father and I had, that deep, true partnership. I took a sip of tea. It had gone lukewarm, but I barely noticed. But after they got engaged, things started changing. She'd make little comments. Michael works so hard, he needs his weekends to rest, when I'd suggest visiting. We're planning our future, we need to focus on us, when I'd ask about holiday plans. Always polite, always with a smile, but underneath, ice. The wedding was beautiful. I wore my best dress, the navy one I'd bought special. I'd lost my husband, but I was gaining a daughter. That's what I told myself. Vanessa's parents barely acknowledged me. Her mother looked at my dress like it offended her personally. I overheard her tell someone I was the help's mother until someone corrected her. I could feel Dorothy's hand tighten around mine. Michael didn't notice. He was so happy that day, so focused on Vanessa. And I told myself it didn't matter. These little slights, they didn't matter. What mattered was my son's happiness. Then Emma was born. My voice softened at the memory, 7 years flooding back in an instant. I drove to the hospital the moment Michael called. I'd never seen anything more beautiful than that tiny girl, with her dark curls and those eyes, she had my eyes. I held her and I thought, this is it. This is the new chapter. I'm a grandmother now. I stayed for 2 weeks after they brought Emma home, helping with night feedings, cooking meals, doing laundry. Vanessa barely spoke to me, but I thought she was just tired, adjusting to motherhood. Michael seemed grateful for the help. When I left, he hugged me tight and said, "I don't know what we'd do without you, Mom." But after that, the invitations got fewer. The visits got shorter. When Noah was born 2 years later, I was only allowed to stay for 3 days. Vanessa said they needed space to bond as a nuclear family. Whatever that meant. I looked up at Dorothy, and I'm sure she could see the years of accumulated hurt in my eyes. Every birthday party, I'd drive the 6 hours from my home to here. I'd bring presents I'd saved for months to buy. Vanessa would accept them with that cold smile, then barely let me stay an hour before suggesting I probably had a long drive home. The children would cry when I left. Emma would wrap her arms around my legs and beg me to stay. And every time, it broke my heart a little more. Last Christmas, they didn't invite me at all. Michael called on Christmas Eve, said they were keeping it small this year, just them and Vanessa's parents. I spent Christmas alone in my apartment, looking at pictures of my grandchildren on my phone, wondering what I'd done wrong. Dorothy made a small sound of sympathy. I tried to talk to Michael about it. Once, a few months ago, I called him and asked him directly, had I done something to offend Vanessa? Was there something I could do to fix whatever was broken between us? He got quiet, that terrible quiet that means someone's uncomfortable. Then he said, "Mom, Vanessa's just particular about her space. You have to understand, she grew up differently than we did." Differently. I let out a bitter laugh. He meant wealthier. He meant she grew up with money and staff and parents who never had to work double shifts at a hospital. He meant I'm an embarrassment to her. "But I'm his mother," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm their grandmother. I changed his diapers. I nursed him through chicken pox. I taught him to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to be kind to others. I gave him everything I had. How does that become something to be ashamed of?" The tears finally came then, hot and unstoppable. Dorothy moved her chair closer and wrapped her arms around me, and I cried like I hadn't cried in years. For the son I'd lost. For the grandchildren being kept from me. For the life I'd imagined that would never be. When the tears finally subsided, I wiped my eyes with the tissue Dorothy handed me. "I thought this Thanksgiving would be different," I whispered. "Michael called 2 weeks ago, said they wanted me to come early, help with preparations." He sounded like my boy again, warm and genuine. I was so happy. I bought new clothes for the kids, spent hours baking those pies. I thought I was getting my family back. I looked toward the window, where I could see Michael's house next door, so close and yet impossibly far away. Instead, I got a door closed in my face and my grandchildren pulled away from me like I was dangerous. Like I was nobody. Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that changed everything. "There's something you need to know. Something I've been debating whether to tell you." I looked up at her, seeing something in her expression I couldn't quite read. Concern. Anger. Determination. "I've lived next to them for 3 years, Dorothy said carefully. "I've seen things. Heard things. And I think Vanessa's reasons for keeping you away aren't what you think they are." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean?" Dorothy stood up and walked to her kitchen window, the one that looked directly into Michael and Vanessa's backyard. "I think," she said slowly, "that this has nothing to do with social class or embarrassment. I think this is about money. Your money, specifically." I stared at her, confused. "But I don't have money. I'm a retired nurse living on Social Security and a small pension." Dorothy turned back to me, and her eyes were serious. "Maybe not. But your grandchildren do. And I think Vanessa knows it." The words hung in the air like smoke, impossible to grasp but impossible to ignore. "I don't understand," I said, my mind racing. "What money?" Dorothy came back to the table and sat down, leaning forward with the intensity of someone about to share a dangerous secret. 2 months ago, I was in my garden, pruning the roses along the fence. Vanessa was in her backyard on the phone. She thought no one could hear her, but sound carries. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but once I heard what she was saying, I couldn't stop listening. Dorothy paused, as if weighing her words carefully. She was talking to someone about a trust fund. She kept saying the grandmother controls it and we need access before the kids turn 18. She sounded frustrated, angry. She said something like, if we can prove she's unfit or absent from their lives, we might be able to petition for early release of the funds. The room tilted slightly. I gripped the edge of the table. A trust fund? But David died 24 years ago. We had life insurance that paid off the house and got Michael through school, but there wasn't much left after that. I don't know anything about a trust fund. Are you sure? Dorothy pressed gently. Could there have been something your husband set up that you didn't know about? Something separate? I tried to think back through the fog of grief and exhaustion that had defined those years after David's death. There had been so many papers to sign, so many meetings with lawyers and accountants. I'd been numb, just going through the motions, focused only on keeping Michael fed and clothed and safe. There was a lawyer, I said slowly. Richard Hayes. He handled David's estate. But he said everything was straightforward: life insurance, the house, a small savings account. Nothing about a trust for grandchildren who didn't even exist yet. When's the last time you spoke to him? I haven't. Not since those first few months after David died. There was no reason to. Dorothy stood up decisively. I think we need to give him a call. Right now. But it's 2 days before Thanksgiving. Which means if he's working today, he'll probably be in his office trying to clear his desk before the holiday. And if this is what I think it is, you need to know before tomorrow. She was already pulling out her phone, searching for the number. Something in her certainty made me believe this was important, urgent in a way I didn't fully understand yet. 10 minutes later, we had an appointment. Richard Hayes had sounded surprised to hear from me after all these years, but when Dorothy briefly explained there were questions about David's estate and potential trust funds, his voice had changed. Became more serious, more formal. Come to my office now, he'd said. This isn't a conversation for the phone. His office was above the local diner in downtown Fairfield, up a narrow staircase that creaked with age. The waiting room was small but neat, filled with leather chairs and old law books. Richard Hayes emerged from an inner office, and I was startled to see how much he'd aged. Then again, so had I. 24 years had passed since I'd sat across from him, newly widowed and terrified. Please, come in, he said, his voice kind but professional. He shook Dorothy's hand when I introduced her, seeming to understand without being told that I needed someone with me. His office smelled like old paper and coffee. He gestured for us to sit, then settled behind his desk, pulling out a thick file with David's name on the tab. My breath caught seeing my late husband's name written in faded ink. I'm glad you called, Richard said, opening the file. I've been meaning to reach out to you, actually. There are some documents here that are becoming relevant now that your grandchildren are getting older. Documents? My voice sounded small in the quiet office. Your husband was a very thorough man, Richard began. When he knew his heart condition was serious. Wait. I held up a hand. David knew? He knew he was sick? Richard's expression softened with sympathy. He'd been diagnosed 6 months before he died. He didn't want to worry you, but he came to me to get his affairs in order. He set up the life insurance, yes, but he also did something else. Something he specifically asked me not to tell you about until it became necessary. My hands were shaking. I pressed them flat against my thighs. David had a settlement from a workplace accident early in your marriage. He never told you about it because he wanted to save it, let it grow. He invested it carefully over the years. When he got his diagnosis, he restructured everything into a trust fund specifically for any future grandchildren. Richard pulled out a document, turned it so I could see. Numbers swam before my eyes. The trust is currently valued at approximately $470,000. The world went silent. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. That's not possible. It's very possible. And very real. David was smart with money, even if he didn't have much of it. He made careful investments, and over 24 years, with compound interest and market growth, that initial settlement grew substantially. Dorothy's hand found mine, squeezing tight. The trust, Richard continued, is structured very specifically. The funds are held for the benefit of Michael's children, your grandchildren, Emma and Noah. They cannot access it until they turn 18, at which point it will be split equally between them for education, home purchase, or other life-establishing purposes. But who controls it until then? Dorothy asked, and I was grateful because I still couldn't form words. That's the critical part. Richard looked directly at me. You do. You're the trustee. David specified that you would manage the trust until the children reach majority. You have the authority to make decisions about investment strategy, and you're required to maintain a relationship with the beneficiaries, your grandchildren, to ensure the funds are used appropriately when the time comes. Does Michael know about this? I managed to ask. Yes. I contacted him when Emma was born, as per David's instructions. The trust activated upon the birth of his first grandchild. Michael was informed of the structure and the terms. And Vanessa? Richard's expression darkened slightly. I assume Michael shared the information with her, though I never spoke to her directly. But here's something that concerns me. He pulled out another document. 3 months ago, I received a letter from a different attorney representing Michael and Vanessa. They were inquiring about the possibility of restructuring the trust, accessing the funds early for the children's immediate needs. They claimed you had become estranged from the family and were no longer fit to serve as trustee. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. 3 months ago. While Michael was calling me occasionally, making small talk, pretending everything was normal, they were trying to take away my role as trustee. Trying to access David's gift to his grandchildren. What did you tell them? Dorothy asked sharply. I told them that the trust is ironclad. David was very specific. The funds cannot be accessed early under any circumstances, and the trustee can only be removed for cause, incapacity, death, or severe malfeasance. Being estranged doesn't qualify, especially since I had no evidence you were actually estranged from your grandchildren. Richard leaned forward, his expression grave. But there's something else you need to know. Something I probably should have told you years ago, but David asked me to keep it sealed unless specific circumstances arose. He pulled out one more document, this one in a sealed envelope with my name written on it in handwriting I recognized immediately. David's handwriting. My vision blurred with tears. He wrote you a letter. To be opened only if someone tried to separate you from your grandchildren or challenged your role as trustee. I think now qualifies. My hands trembled as I took the envelope. The paper was yellowed with age, sealed with wax like something from another era. Dorothy's hand stayed on my shoulder as I carefully opened it. David's words, written 24 years ago, reached across death to speak to me. My dearest love. If you're reading this, it means someone is trying to keep you from our grandchildren. I can't imagine who would be cruel enough to do such a thing, but I know you, and I know you're probably blaming yourself. You're probably wondering what you did wrong. So I need you to hear this, you did nothing wrong. You are the most loving, devoted person I've ever known. The money in this trust isn't just for the kids, it's protection for you. I've structured it so that no one can push you out of their lives without losing everything. Because I know how much you'll love these grandchildren we'll never meet together. I know you'll sacrifice for them the way you sacrificed for Michael. And I couldn't bear the thought of someone taking advantage of your generous heart. There's a clause in the trust, one Richard will explain to you. If anyone tries to separate you from the children, if they deny you reasonable access or attempt to remove you as trustee without legal cause, the entire trust dissolves. Every penny goes to the Children's Hospital Foundation in our name. Not 1 cent goes to whoever tried to push you out. I'm also ensuring you have legal standing. Connecticut law provides for grandparent visitation rights under certain circumstances. I've set aside funds within the trust to pay for any legal fees you might need to enforce those rights. Don't let anyone make you feel small. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. You are everything. You always were. I love you beyond death, beyond time, beyond everything. Forever yours, David. I couldn't see the page anymore through my tears. Dorothy's arm wrapped around me as sobs shook my whole body. Even from beyond the grave, David was protecting me. Protecting our grandchildren. protecting the love he knew I would have for them. "I'm sorry," Richard said quietly. "I should have reached out sooner when their attorney contacted me. I should have suspected something was wrong." "What happens now?" Dorothy asked practically, while I tried to compose myself. Richard's expression turned determined. "Now, we make sure everyone understands the terms of this trust. I'll draft a letter to Michael and Vanessa's attorney explaining that any attempts to restrict your access to your grandchildren will result in the complete dissolution of the trust. I'll also outline your legal rights under Connecticut's grandparent visitation statute." He looked at me with something like admiration. "Your husband gave you power. Real power. The question is, are you ready to use it?" I thought about Emma's face when she saw me at the door. Noah's arms reaching for me. Michael standing frozen in the hallway, unable or unwilling to defend me. I thought about 24 years of working double shifts, of missing sleep and meals in my own life to give my son every opportunity. Of David lying in his hospital bed that last day, making me promise to be strong. I thought about Vanessa's cold eyes and the door closing in my face. "Yes," I said, my voice steady for the first time all day. "I'm ready." Before we continue, make sure to like this video and subscribe. With your support, we can keep bringing more stories from powerful women that touch the heart of all of us. Richard worked quickly, making phone calls, drafting documents. Within 2 hours, he prepared a comprehensive letter outlining the trust terms and my legal rights. He printed multiple copies, one for me, one for Michael and Vanessa's attorney, one for his files. "Deliver this in person," he advised. "Tomorrow morning, Thanksgiving Day. Make sure there are witnesses, other family members, if possible. You want this to be clear and public. Won't that ruin Thanksgiving?" I asked. Dorothy snorted. "I think Vanessa already did that when she slammed the door in your face." Richard smiled slightly. "Your friend is right. And sometimes the truth needs to be spoken, even when it's uncomfortable. Especially when it's uncomfortable." As we left his office, the November sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Tomorrow was Thanksgiving. Tomorrow, everything would change. "Come back to my house," Dorothy said. "You'll stay with me tonight. We'll make a plan." That evening, sitting in Dorothy's warm kitchen with the legal documents spread across the table, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not quite hope, it was too soon for that. But something close to it. Determination. Purpose. The knowledge that I wasn't powerless after all. David had made sure of that. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in Dorothy's guest room, staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from the streetlight dance across the unfamiliar walls. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanessa's cold face. Emma's reaching arms. Michael's silence. At 4 a.m, I gave up trying to sleep. I sat at the window and watched the sky slowly lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gray of dawn. Thanksgiving Day. November 27th, 2025. Dorothy found me there at 6, already dressed, my hands wrapped around the legal documents like a lifeline. "You're sure about this?" she asked gently, setting a cup of coffee beside me. "No," I admitted. "But I'm doing it anyway." She smiled. "That's bravery, dear. Doing the terrifying thing because it's right." We waited until 9 o'clock. Richard had advised me that other family members would likely arrive around midday for Thanksgiving dinner, but I should come earlier. "Catch them off guard," he'd said. "Before Vanessa has time to prepare her defenses." Dorothy insisted on coming with me. "You need a witness. And backup. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't back down." "I won't back down," I said, surprised by the steel in my own voice. "I know. But it helps to have someone remind you of that when things get hard." At 9:15, we walked across the lawn to my son's house. The morning was cold and clear, the kind of perfect autumn day that belonged in a painting. Smoke rose from chimneys up and down the street. Inside warm houses, families were probably starting to prepare their turkeys, their stuffing, their pies. I thought about my own pies, still sitting in Dorothy's refrigerator. Made with love for grandchildren who'd been pulled away from me. My hand shook as I rang the doorbell. This time, Michael answered. He looked terrible, exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed like he hadn't slept either. When he saw me, something complicated crossed his face. Surprise. Guilt. Fear. Mom, what are you? I need to come in, Michael. We need to talk. All of us. This really isn't a good time. Now, Michael. My voice was firm. I barely recognized it as my own. He hesitated, then stepped aside. Dorothy followed me in, and I saw his eyes widen slightly when he realized I hadn't come alone. The house smelled like coffee and cinnamon rolls. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Vanessa at the counter, her back to us, arranging pastries on a serving platter. She was wearing a designer loungewear set, her hair already perfect even at this early hour. She turned when she heard voices, and her expression went cold when she saw me. What is she doing here? Not hello. Not even a pretense of civility. Just pure hostility. We need to talk, I said quietly. All of us. It's important. We have nothing to talk about. I told you yesterday. It's about the trust fund. The words fell into the room like a grenade. Vanessa went very still. Michael's face drained of color. What trust fund? Vanessa's voice was controlled, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. The one my late husband set up for Emma and Noah. The one you've been trying to access for the past 3 months. Michael made a small, choked sound. Mom, how did I find out that you and your wife tried to have me removed as trustee? That you told a lawyer I was estranged from my grandchildren so you could get your hands on money that doesn't belong to you? That's not what happened, Michael said quickly, but his voice lacked conviction. Then what did happen? I opened the folder Richard had prepared, pulled out the letter from their attorney. Because this letter, sent to Richard Hayes 3 months ago, says exactly that. It claims I'm unfit. It claims I've abandoned my relationship with Emma and Noah. Vanessa's mask cracked slightly. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. I understand that you've been systematically pushing me out of my grandchildren's lives for years. Short visits. Cancelled holidays. Yesterday's humiliation at the door. All of it calculated to create a paper trail showing I was absent, uninvolved, estranged. That's ridiculous. Is it? Then why did you slam the door in my face yesterday when I came for Thanksgiving, a visit Michael specifically invited me to? Why did you pull Emma and Noah away from me like I was dangerous? Vanessa's eyes flashed. Those children are mine. They're also mine. I'm their grandmother. I have rights. You have no rights. Michael is our son, this is our family, and you don't get to. Actually, Dorothy spoke up for the first time, her voice calm but firm. She has quite a few rights. Legal ones. Would you like to hear about them? Vanessa's gaze snapped to Dorothy like she'd just noticed her presence. Who the hell are you? I'm the neighbor who's been watching you mistreat this woman for 3 years. I'm also the witness who heard you on the phone 2 months ago talking about getting control of the grandmother's trust before the children turn 18. Vanessa's face went white, then red. You were spying on me? You were having a private conversation in your backyard loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. I just happened to be the one actually listening. Michael looked between his wife and his mother, confusion and dawning horror on his face. Vanessa, what is she talking about? Nothing. She's lying. I'm not lying, I said quietly. And neither is Richard Hayes, the estate attorney who manages your children's trust fund. The trust your father set up before he died, Michael. The trust that currently holds $470,000 for Emma and Noah's future. Michael actually stumbled backward, catching himself on the counter. 470, what? You didn't tell him the amount, I said to Vanessa. It wasn't a question. Her silence was answer enough. You told me it was maybe 50,000, Michael said slowly, his voice hollow. You said it was a small college fund, barely worth mentioning. I was trying to protect us from exactly this kind of manipulation, Vanessa snapped. She's using money to control our family. I'm not using anything. The words burst out of me with more force than I intended. I didn't even know about this trust until yesterday. Your father created it to take care of his grandchildren, to make sure they'd have opportunities. And he made me trustee because he knew that I would love them and protect them and put their interests first. I pulled out David's letter, my hands shaking. He also knew that someone might try to use them. Might try to push me out so they could access money that's supposed to be for Emma and Noah, not for designer clothes and luxury vacations. How dare you? How dare I? How dare you? You've spent 5 years poisoning my son against me, keeping my grandchildren from me, trying to erase me from their lives so you could claim I was an absent grandmother who didn't deserve her role as trustee. My voice was rising, years of accumulated pain and anger finally breaking free. I worked double shifts for decades to raise my son alone. I sacrificed everything, my health, my social life, my own happiness, to give him the life he has now. And you've spent 5 years making him ashamed of where he came from. Making him ashamed of me. Mom, Michael's voice cracked. Do you know what yesterday did to me? I turned to my son, and I could feel tears streaming down my face, but I didn't care anymore. Standing on your doorstep, holding pies I'd made with love, watching your wife pull my grandchildren away from me like I was a threat? Watching you stand there and say nothing? Do you have any idea how much that broke me? I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm so sorry, You just what? You just let your wife treat your mother like garbage because it was easier than standing up to her? You just forgot every value I tried to teach you about loyalty and family and kindness? She said you made her uncomfortable, Michael said weakly. She said you were too involved, too pushy, that we needed space. I saw my grandchildren 3 times last year, Michael. 3 times. For a total of maybe 8 hours. How is that too involved? Vanessa stepped forward, her face twisted with rage. This is exactly why we didn't want you here. You're manipulative and you use guilt. No. Dorothy's voice cut through the room like a knife. Don't you dare try to spin this. I've watched this woman bring gifts every birthday, drive 6 hours each way just to spend an hour with her grandchildren before you found an excuse to send her home. I've seen her sitting in her car outside this house, crying, after you've turned her away. You want to talk about manipulation? Let's talk about how you've systematically isolated Michael from his mother so you could control every aspect of his life. You don't know anything about our marriage. I know that healthy marriages don't require cutting off family members. I know that good mothers-in-law don't deserve to be treated like unwanted intruders. And I know that this stops now. I pulled out the final document from Richard's folder. My hands were steadier now. This is a letter from the estate attorney explaining the full terms of the trust, including one clause you clearly didn't know about. I handed it to Michael, not to Vanessa. He needed to see this. He needed to understand. If anyone attempts to restrict my access to Emma and Noah, or tries to remove me as trustee without legal cause, the entire trust dissolves. Every penny goes to the Children's Hospital Foundation. Your children get nothing. Vanessa lunged for the letter, but Michael held it away from her, reading it with growing horror. Furthermore, I continued, my voice growing stronger, Connecticut law provides for grandparent visitation rights. Richard Hayes has already filed a petition on my behalf. You can fight it in court if you want, but Richard is very confident I'll win. And the trust will pay for every legal fee. You can't do this, Vanessa hissed. I already have. The petition was filed electronically this morning at 8 a.m. You'll be formally served within 48 hours. Michael looked up from the letter, his face stricken. Mom, please, we can work this out. Can we? Because yesterday you let your wife slam a door in my face. You let her pull my grandchildren away from me. You stood there and said nothing while I was treated like I meant nothing to this family. I was wrong, he said, and his voice broke completely. I was so wrong. I've been wrong for years. Vanessa, she's so strong, and she had all these ideas about how things should be, and I thought she knew better than me about family because her family has money and success and I don't? I finished quietly. Because I was just a nurse? Because I raised you in a small house and drove an old car and couldn't afford to send you to private schools? No. God, no, Mom, I never thought. Yes, you did. Or you let Vanessa make you think it. You let her convince you that I wasn't good enough for your new life. The doorbell rang. We all froze. That'll be my parents, Vanessa said tightly. And Michael's Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah. They're coming for Thanksgiving dinner. Perfect, Dorothy said calmly. Witnesses. Vanessa's eyes went wide with panic. You can't, you wouldn't dare. Answer the door, Michael, I said quietly. He looked between me and Vanessa, paralyzed. Now, Michael. Let them in. Let's see if you can find your voice in front of your whole family. Let's see if you can finally stand up and tell the truth. For a long moment, I thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd side with Vanessa again, choose the easy path, the comfortable lie. Then he walked to the door and opened it. Vanessa's parents stood on the threshold, dressed in expensive casual wear, holding a wine bottle that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Behind them were Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah, people I hadn't seen since Michael's wedding. They all stared at me in surprise. Oh, Vanessa's mother said, her tone making it clear exactly what she thought of my presence. You're here. Yes, I said, lifting my chin. I'm here. And I'm not leaving. Not without my grandchildren. From upstairs, I heard the sound of small feet running. Grandma? Emma's voice, filled with hope and confusion. Is that Grandma? And then they were there, at the top of the stairs. Emma in her princess pajamas, Noah with his hair sticking up every direction, both of them staring down at me with those beautiful, innocent faces. Grandma! Noah shrieked, and started running down the stairs. Noah, no! Vanessa started forward, but Michael's hand shot out, grabbing her arm. Everyone went very still. Let him go, Michael said quietly. Michael. Let him go. His voice was different. Stronger. Like something inside him had finally snapped into place. Noah ran down the remaining stairs and threw himself into my arms. Emma was right behind him, both of them hugging me so tight I could barely breathe. I sank to my knees, wrapping them in my arms, tears streaming down my face. We missed you, Emma whispered. Why didn't you come yesterday? Mommy said you didn't want to see us anymore. My eyes snapped up to Vanessa's face. She'd gone pale. I will always want to see you, I said fiercely. Always. I love you more than anything in this world. Michael was staring at his wife like he'd never seen her before. You told them she didn't want to see them? Vanessa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Answer me. Michael's voice cracked like thunder. You told our children their grandmother didn't want to see them? I thought it would be easier. Easier? Easier than what? Easier than admitting you were trying to cut my mother out of our lives? Easier than telling me the truth? Uncle Tom cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe we should come back another time. No, Michael said firmly. Stay. Everyone stay. Because I need witnesses for this. He turned to face the room, his arm going around my shoulders as I stood up, still holding Emma and Noah's hands. My mother is not estranged from this family. She never was. She's been systematically pushed out by my wife, and I let it happen. I was weak and I was wrong, and I'm done. Michael, think about what you're doing, Vanessa started. I'm thinking clearly for the first time in years. My mother raised me alone after my father died. She worked herself to exhaustion to give me every opportunity. She loved me unconditionally. And I repaid her by letting you treat her like she was worthless. He looked at me, and I saw tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. For yesterday, for the past 5 years, for every time I should have defended you and didn't. Michael, the children, Vanessa tried again. The children deserve to know their grandmother. The woman who loves them without condition, without agenda, without caring about anything except their happiness. Not the trust fund, not control, not any of the things you accused her of wanting. He turned back to Vanessa, and his voice was cold. We're going to counseling. You and me. And if you ever try to keep my mother from her grandchildren again, I will leave. I will take Emma and Noah, and I will leave. The room was absolutely silent. Then Emma tugged on my hand. Grandma, will you stay for Thanksgiving? Please? I looked at my son. At Dorothy standing proud and protective by the door. At the gathered family members, all watching with varying degrees of shock and understanding. Yes, sweetheart, I said softly. I'll stay. The Thanksgiving that followed was unlike any I'd ever experienced. Vanessa retreated to the bedroom with her mother, both of them tight-lipped and furious. Her father made awkward small talk for a few minutes, then excused himself to make business calls. But Uncle Tom and Aunt Sarah stayed, and I saw something in their eyes that looked like relief. We've been worried, Aunt Sarah told me quietly while we prepared vegetables in the kitchen. The past few years, Michael seemed different. Distant. We thought it was just stress from work, but now. Now you know, I finished gently. She squeezed my hand. I'm glad you fought back. The children didn't leave my side all day. Emma helped me make stuffing, carefully measuring ingredients and asking me to tell her stories about when her daddy was little. Noah sat on my lap while I peeled potatoes, his small warm weight against me healing something that had broken yesterday. Michael moved through the house like a man in a daze, constantly looking at me as if to make sure I was really there. Every time I caught his eye, he'd mouth I'm sorry, and I'd nod, because forgiveness is a process, not a moment. Dorothy fit into the chaos like she'd always been family. She made her famous cranberry sauce, told embarrassing stories about things she'd seen through her kitchen window, and generally filled the house with the kind of warmth that had been missing for too long. Vanessa emerged around 2 in the afternoon, her makeup repaired, her armor back in place. She avoided looking at me, but she didn't try to pull the children away. Michael had drawn a line, and she knew it. We sat down to dinner at 4 o'clock. The dining room table was extended to fit everyone, covered in a cream tablecloth I'd never seen before. The turkey was golden and perfect. The side dishes crowded together in a feast that should have felt celebratory. Instead, it felt fragile. Like we were all walking on glass, afraid to break whatever temporary peace we'd achieved. Michael stood at the head of the table, looking at each of us in turn. Before we eat, I need to say something. His voice was steady but strained. This year, I almost lost the most important person in my life because I was too weak to stand up for what was right. I let pride and fear and misguided loyalty guide my choices instead of love. He looked directly at me. Mom, you deserved better. You deserved a son who remembered where he came from and honored the sacrifices you made. You deserved a son who protected you the way you always protected me. I failed you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making that right." My throat tightened with emotion. "I'm grateful you fought for us. For me, for Emma, for Noah. I'm grateful you didn't give up, even when we gave you every reason to." Emma spoke up suddenly, her small voice clear in the quiet room. "Daddy, why did Mommy say Grandma didn't want to see us?" Everyone froze. Michael looked at Vanessa. She stared at her plate. "Because Mommy made a mistake," he said carefully. "A big one. Grandma always wanted to see you. She loves you more than anything. And from now on, she's going to visit as often as she wants, and you're going to visit her too. That's a promise." "Good," Noah declared. "I like Grandma." Despite everything, I felt myself smile. We ate. The conversation was stilted at first, but gradually warmed as Uncle Tom told stories and Sarah asked the children about school. Dorothy and I exchanged glances across the table, sharing silent communication. After dinner, while the men cleaned up, Michael had insisted, perhaps as part of his penance, I sat with Emma and Noah in the living room, reading them stories. Emma curled against one side, Noah against the other, and I felt complete in a way I hadn't in years. Vanessa watched from the doorway. I looked up and met her eyes. She looked away first. Later, when the children were in bed and most of the guests had left, Michael walked me to Dorothy's house. The November night was cold and clear, stars sharp as diamonds overhead. "Will you forgive me?" he asked quietly. "Eventually?" "I already have," I said truthfully. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean things go back to how they were." "I know. I don't want them to. I want things to be better. Real. Then make them real. Stand up for what matters. Don't let anyone, not Vanessa, not her family, not society's expectations, make you forget who you are." He hugged me then, and he was my little boy again. The child I'd rocked to sleep, the teenager I'd stayed up late with, the young man I'd sent into the world with every hope and prayer a mother could offer. "I love you, Mom. I love you too. Always." Dorothy was waiting with tea when I came inside. "Quite a day," she said mildly. I laughed, surprising myself. "Quite a day. You did good. David would be proud." I thought about the letter, my husband's words reaching across 24 years. He knew. Somehow, he knew this might happen. That I'd need protection, not just from poverty but from people who would try to diminish me. He knew because he loved you. Real love protects. I sipped my tea, feeling exhaustion settle into my bones. But it was good exhaustion, the kind that comes after a battle fought and won. "What happens now?" Dorothy asked. "Now?" I considered. "Now I see my grandchildren regularly. We set up a schedule, put it in writing if we have to. I maintain my role as trustee, make sure Emma and Noah's future is secure. I watch them grow up. I get to be their grandmother. And Michael and Vanessa? That's their journey. They need counseling, clearly. They need to rebuild on honest foundation. But that's their work to do. I can't fix their marriage. I can only protect my relationship with my grandchildren." Dorothy nodded approvingly. Wise woman. I looked out the window at my son's house, lights glowing warm against the darkness. "I learned something today," I said quietly. "I learned that being kind doesn't mean being a doormat. That loving someone doesn't mean letting them hurt you. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up and say no more." "Your husband's letter gave you the legal power," Dorothy observed. "But you're the one who found the courage to use it." She was right. David had given me tools, but I'd had to pick them up. I'd had to walk into that house, face my son's weakness and my daughter-in-law's hostility, and claim my place in my grandchildren's lives. I'd had to believe I was worth fighting for. "Thank you," I said to Dorothy. "For being there. For listening. For standing with me. That's what neighbors are for. And friends." She smiled. "Besides, I've been wanting to tell Vanessa off for 3 years. Today was deeply satisfying. We laughed together, and it felt like release. Like breathing after holding your breath too long." My phone buzzed. A text from Michael: "Breakfast tomorrow? You, me, and the kids?" "Vanessa's going to her parents for the morning." I typed back, "I'd love that." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "Finally, thank you for not giving up on me." "Never," I replied. "That's what mothers do." I set the phone down and finished my tea. Tomorrow I'd have breakfast with my son and grandchildren. Next week, I'd meet with Richard to ensure all the legal protections were firmly in place. Next month, maybe I'd start visiting every other weekend. I'd build a new relationship with my family, one based on honesty and clear boundaries and mutual respect. It wouldn't be perfect. Vanessa and I would probably never be close. There would be difficult conversations ahead, awkward moments, old wounds that needed time to heal. But I'd be present. I'd be in my grandchildren's lives. I'd watch them grow, celebrate their victories, comfort their sorrows, be the grandmother David knew I would be. And maybe, if I was very lucky, one day Emma or Noah would grow up and have children of their own. And they'd tell those children stories about their great-grandmother who taught them that love is worth fighting for. That dignity matters. That you should never let anyone make you feel small. I thought about David's letter, still tucked in my purse. Don't let anyone tell you you're not good enough. You are everything. Maybe I was finally starting to believe it. Dorothy caught me smiling. "What are you thinking about?" "That I'm spending Christmas here. With my grandchildren. And no one's going to stop me." She raised her teacup in a toast. "Damn right they're not." We clinked our cups together, 2 women who'd found each other across a property line and became family by choice. Who'd stood together against injustice and won. The November night deepened outside, but inside Dorothy's kitchen, it was warm and bright. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, difficult conversations, the slow work of rebuilding what had been broken. But tonight, I was at peace. Tonight, I was a grandmother who'd fought for her family and won. And that was everything. If this story moved you, click on the next video that's appearing on the screen now. I'm sure you'll be surprised by this new emotional and heartbreaking story I have right here to tell you.